Pilot orders black twins to move to the back until billionaire dad, the airline owner, arrives. But what that pilot did to those teenagers before their father showed up will make you question everything you thought you knew about progress in America. Captain Bradley Mitchell's voice cut through the first-class cabin of Prestige Airways Flight 118 like a verdict. Those two don't belong here. Get them moved to economy where they should be. I don't care what their tickets say. Kids like that don't fly first class. The words hit 15-year-old Maya Carter like a physical blow. Her twin brother Jordan's hand, reaching for his seatbelt, froze mid-air. They sat in seats 2A and 2B, their legitimate first-class boarding passes clutched in suddenly sweating palms, unable to process what they were hearing from the cockpit doorway. And here's what we need to face right now. Racial discrimination in 2024 isn't some relic we've conquered or moved past. It's alive and thriving at every level, including in cockpits where captains with decades of experience look at black teenagers in hoodies and immediately assume fraud. And it's gotten worse than the civil rights era because back then, at least the racism was honest and out in the open. Today it hides behind words like protocol and security concerns and doesn't belong here while targeting black bodies with the same hatred our grandparents faced. The weapons have evolved, but the war on black dignity continues. Maya felt her stomach drop, but she wasn't surprised. Humiliated beyond words. Terrified, absolutely. But surprised? This was the 7th time this year someone had looked at her and Jordan and decided they were in the wrong place, that they'd somehow scammed or stolen their way into spaces meant for white people. She was 15 years old and already exhausted from constantly having to prove she had a right to exist in premium spaces. The scene on Prestige Airways Flight 118 looked like injustice about to take flight. Maya's hands trembled as she tried to understand what was happening. Jordan's jaw clenched with an anger he'd been taught to suppress his entire life. They were dressed casually in hoodies and jeans, yes, but their tickets were valid, purchased by their father for this trip to New York where Maya would compete in a national dance championship she'd worked 3 years to qualify for. Around them, first-class passengers stared with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. A businessman in 3C pulled out his phone and started recording. A young couple in 4A exchanged worried glances but said nothing. An elderly woman across the aisle looked sympathetic but stayed silent. The evidence was being captured from multiple angles, but not one person spoke up to say, "Wait, let's verify this before humiliating these children." Flight attendant Rebecca Torres approached their row, her face showing clear discomfort with the order she'd just received. "The captain is requesting that you move to economy seats," she said quietly, unable to meet their eyes. "But?" Jordan asked, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Our tickets are valid. We checked in. We boarded. Everything was fine until he saw us." Rebecca glanced back toward the cockpit where Captain Mitchell stood watching, arms crossed, satisfaction on his face. "Please," she whispered. "Just cooperate. I don't want this to become a bigger situation. A bigger situation than falsely accusing us and trying to move us because of our skin color?" Maya said, her voice breaking. "We have a right to be here. We paid for these seats." But even as she said it, Maya knew the truth that every black person learns eventually. Rights only matter if people with power choose to respect them. And Captain Bradley Mitchell, with 28 years of authority and a uniform that commanded deference, had decided their rights didn't matter. Captain Mitchell's voice boomed again. "Rebecca, I gave you an order. Either they move voluntarily or I'll have them removed. We have a schedule to keep." Tears began streaming down Maya's face. This trip was supposed to be special. Her first time competing at nationals. Her chance to show 3 years of dedication and sacrifice. And now it was being destroyed before they even took off because a pilot looked at 2 black teenagers and saw criminals instead of children. "Sir, please," Jordan tried one more time. "Just look at our tickets. Call our father. There's been a mistake." "The only mistake was letting you board in the first place," Mitchell said coldly. "Now move, or I'll have security remove you and you won't fly at all today." The powerlessness was crushing. They were 15 years old, alone, facing a captain whose authority was absolute on his aircraft. Their father was on his own flight, unreachable. The other passengers were watching and recording but not defending them. And in moments, they'd be marched to the back of the plane in front of everyone, humiliated for the crime of being black in first class. And if you're watching this and haven't hit that subscribe button yet, you need to ask yourself why. Is it because you don't think these stories matter? Is it because you're comfortable consuming black trauma as entertainment without supporting the channels that expose injustice? This 15-year-old girl is about to have her dreams crushed by a racist pilot, and if you can't even click a button to amplify her story, then you're part of the problem. Subscribe now. Prove you care about more than just watching. Prove you're not just another silent bystander. If you believe no child should ever be ordered to the back because of their skin color, keep watching. If you think racial discrimination on airplanes ended with the civil rights movement, you need to see what happens in the next few minutes. And if you've ever been treated like you don't belong somewhere because of how you look, drop a comment below and tell us your story. We're reading every single one. Also tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now, because this story is reaching people everywhere. This doesn't end the way you think it will. Hit that like button if you stand against racism, and subscribe to this channel because we're exposing the incidents that airlines desperately want to keep quiet. What happens next will restore your faith in justice but also break your heart at how long it takes to arrive. But to understand how two exceptional teenagers ended up being ordered to the back of an airplane in 2024, you need to know who Maya and Jordan Carter really are. Because this nightmare didn't start with Captain Mitchell's discrimination. It started that morning in their Miami home with excitement, careful preparation, and dreams that would soon be shattered by prejudice. Maya and Jordan Carter were 15 years old, sophomores at Miami Arts Academy, and the kind of teenagers that made teachers smile and parents proud. Maya was a competitive dancer who dedicated her life to ballet and contemporary dance since she was 6. She'd won regional competitions, earned scholarships, and just qualified for the National Youth Dance Championship in New York. Her dream was to dance with 𝐼𝒃 American Dance Theater someday, to follow in the footsteps of the black excellence that company represented. Jordan was Maya's twin by 4 minutes and her fiercest supporter. Where Maya expressed herself through movement, Jordan expressed himself through words. He was editor of the school newspaper, debate team captain, and had just been accepted into a prestigious summer journalism program at Columbia University. He wrote with a maturity beyond his years about social justice, inequality, and the black experience in America. His teachers said he had the potential to be the next Ta-Nehisi Coates. The twins were incredibly close in the way that twins often are, but their bond went deeper. They'd learned early that the world saw them differently than it saw their white classmates. They'd experienced the suspicious looks in stores, the assumptions about their intelligence, the surprise when they excelled. So they protected each other, lifted each other up, reminded each other of their worth when the world tried to diminish it. Their father, Marcus Carter, had built a tech empire from nothing. He'd grown up poor in Liberty City, worked 3 jobs to put himself through Florida A&M, and founded a software company that revolutionized data security. At 43, he was a billionaire who'd recently made a quiet acquisition of the struggling Prestige Airways, planning to restructure it while keeping his ownership confidential during the transition. He taught his children to be proud of their success but humble in how they carried it, to never forget where they came from or the ancestors who'd paved the way. This trip to New York meant everything to Maya. 3 years of 6-hour daily practices, of missed parties and social events, of pushing through injuries and exhaustion, all leading to this moment. The National Youth Dance Championship was where scouts from major companies would be watching, where futures were made. Jordan was coming along to support his sister and to visit Columbia's campus since he'd be there for the summer program. That Friday morning, the Carter household buzzed with excited energy. Maya had packed and repacked her competition costumes 3 times, making sure every rhinestone was secure, every shoe ribbon perfect. Jordan had his camera and notebook, ready to document the trip and maybe write a piece about it for the school paper. Their father had booked them first-class tickets on Prestige Airways, wanting them comfortable for the important journey, planning to meet them in New York after his own business flight from Atlanta. Marcus had driven them to Miami International Airport himself, arriving early as always. In the car, he'd given them his standard talk about representing themselves well, staying together, calling if anything felt wrong. But he'd also said something that would echo later. Sometimes people are going to look at you and see your skin color before they see your accomplishments. Don't let that define you. Don't let their limitations become your limitations. At the airport, everything had gone perfectly. Check-in was smooth. The agent had smiled warmly, commented on Maya's dance team jacket, wished her luck at nationals. Security was routine. They'd removed shoes and laptops, walked through scanners, retrieved their belongings without incident. At gate D7, they'd waited with other passengers, Maya stretching to keep her muscles warm, Jordan reviewing his notes for the Colombia visit. Boarding Prestige Airways Flight 118 felt like stepping into luxury. The first-class cabin was spacious and elegant, seats 2A and 2B offering wide leather comfort and extra legroom. They stowed their carry-ons, settled in, put on their hoodies because airplane air conditioning always ran cold. The plane was a newer Airbus A320, sleek and modern, with mood lighting and large windows. Other passengers filtered into first class. An elderly white businessman named Robert Chin in 3C who smiled at them kindly. A young couple in 4A preoccupied with their own conversation. A woman traveling alone in 5B who was already typing on her laptop. Everyone seemed normal, pleasant, ready for a routine flight. The initial flight attendants were wonderful. A young woman named Rebecca Torres had welcomed them aboard with genuine warmth, helped them find space in the overhead bins, brought them bottles of water. Another attendant, Daniel Kim, had checked their seatbelts and asked if they needed anything. Everything felt fine. Normal. Then Captain Bradley Mitchell emerged from the cockpit to do his pre-flight walkthrough. He was 52 years old, a 28-year veteran pilot with Prestige Airways, with graying hair and the kind of confident swagger that comes from decades of unchallenged authority. He moved through the first-class cabin checking overhead bins, greeting passengers with professional courtesy, until he reached row 2 and saw Maya and Jordan. Something shifted in his expression. His eyes narrowed slightly. His mouth pressed into a thin line. He looked at these two black teenagers in hoodies and sneakers, saw their youth and their skin color, and made an immediate assumption that would reveal the prejudice he'd probably carried his entire career. He didn't ask if they needed anything. Didn't welcome them aboard. Didn't treat them with the courtesy he'd shown every white passenger he'd greeted. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the galley where Rebecca was preparing for departure. Maya noticed the look, the suspicion, the judgment. She'd seen it before on teachers' faces when she walked into AP classes, on store employees' faces when she browsed expensive sections, on security guards' faces at the mall. That look that said you don't belong here. She grabbed Jordan's hand under the armrest. Did you see how that pilot looked at us? Jordan had seen it. He'd felt it. But he tried to reassure his sister. We have our tickets. Everything's fine. He's probably just stressed about the flight. But everything wasn't fine. Because at that moment, in the galley, Captain Mitchell was telling Rebecca to move them. Was making assumptions based solely on their appearance. Was about to weaponize his authority to humiliate two innocent teenagers. Rebecca approached reluctantly, her discomfort visible. And that's when Maya and Jordan's dream trip began its transformation into a nightmare that would expose the ugly truth about racism that still flourishes in American aviation. The twins had done everything right. Had the right tickets. The right documentation. The right manners. But to Captain Bradley Mitchell, they had the wrong skin color for first class. And he was about to make sure they knew it. Captain Bradley Mitchell stood in the galley with his arms crossed, his face set in that expression of absolute certainty that comes from decades of unchallenged authority. Flight attendant Rebecca Torres had seen that look before on senior captains who believed their judgment was infallible, who confused experience with wisdom and authority with righteousness. Rebecca, Mitchell said, his voice low but commanding. Those two in 2A and 2B. They need to be moved to economy. Immediately. Rebecca glanced at her tablet, pulling up the manifest, confusion crossing her face. Sir, their boarding passes clearly show first-class seats. The tickets are fully paid, not upgrades or rewards redemptions. Everything's legitimate in the system. Mitchell's jaw tightened. I know an upgrade scam when I see one. I've been flying for 28 years. Gate agents these days are too lenient with these situations. They see a sob story or get pressured and they bend the rules. Rebecca felt her stomach twist. She understood exactly what Mitchell meant by these situations even though he hadn't said it explicitly. She'd worked for airlines long enough to recognize coded language, to know when someone was dancing around racism without naming it directly. "Sir," she said carefully, "there's no indication of any irregularity. The tickets were purchased 4 days ago with a valid credit card. They checked in normally. Security cleared them. I don't see any reason to move them." "I'm giving you a reason," Mitchell said, his voice hardening. "I'm the captain of this aircraft. What I say goes. Now I'm telling you those two don't belong in first class. Move them." This is the impossible position that employees face when authority figures abuse their power. Rebecca knew this was wrong. Knew it was discriminatory. Knew it violated company policy and probably federal law. But Mitchell was the captain. In the hierarchy of an aircraft, his word was law. Challenging him could cost her job, could get her blacklisted in the industry, could end a career she'd worked 10 years to build. "Captain, with respect," Rebecca tried one more time. "If I move passengers without clear cause, they could file a complaint. The company takes discrimination allegations very seriously now. There's been training. New policies." "Then make up a cause," Mitchell snapped. "Tell them there's a maintenance issue with those seats. Tell them we need to rebalance weight distribution. I don't care what story you use. Just get it done." Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she held her tablet. She thought about her own children at home, about how she'd feel if someone treated them this way. She thought about the training she'd sat through just last month about implicit bias and passenger rights. She thought about doing the right thing. But she also thought about her mortgage, about her daughter's college tuition, about the competitive job market for flight attendants pushing 40. She thought about being a single mother who couldn't afford to lose her income. And she made the choice that would haunt her for years to come. "I'll handle it," she said quietly, hating herself as the words left her mouth. "Good," Mitchell said with satisfaction. "And Rebecca, do it quietly. No drama. We have a schedule to keep and I don't want delays because 2 kids got seats they shouldn't have." He walked back toward the cockpit, his posture confident, his conscience apparently unburdened. Rebecca stood in the galley for a moment, trying to steady her breathing, trying to find some way to do this that would minimize the harm even though she knew there was no way to minimize the harm of racial discrimination. This is what systemic racism looks like in practice. It's not always the Mitchell who gives the order. It's also the Rebecca who follows it. It's the people who know something is wrong but prioritize their own security over someone else's dignity. It's the chain of complicity that allows prejudice to function, where each link says they're just following orders, just doing their job, just trying to keep their head down. Another flight attendant, Daniel Kim, noticed Rebecca's distress. "You okay? What did Mitchell want?" "He wants me to move the kids in 2A and 2B to economy," Rebecca said, her voice hollow. "But?" Daniel asked, glancing toward the twins who were settled peacefully in their seats, Maya with headphones on, Jordan reading something on his tablet. Rebecca met his eyes. "You know why?" Daniel's face hardened with understanding and disgust. "That's messed up. Their tickets are legit. I checked them myself during boarding." "I know," Rebecca said. "But he's the captain. You don't have to do this," Daniel said. "You could refuse. File a report. And then what?" Rebecca asked bitterly. "Get fired for insubordination? Get blacklisted? I have kids, Daniel. I have bills. I can't afford to be a hero." "So you're going to humiliate 2 teenagers instead," Daniel said, and it wasn't a question. It was an indictment. Rebecca had no answer. Because he was right. She was about to destroy 2 children's day, maybe damage their sense of safety and belonging, definitely traumatize them, all because she valued her job security more than their dignity. She walked toward row 2, each step feeling like walking to an execution. Maya and Jordan looked up as she approached, their faces open and trusting, expecting maybe an offer of snacks or drinks, having no idea what was about to happen. Rebecca opened her mouth to speak, to deliver Mitchell's discriminatory order wrapped in whatever lies she could construct to make it sound legitimate. And in that moment, she made a choice that would define her not as the hero who refused but as the collaborator who complied. "Excuse me," she said quietly, and the twins smiled at her, These beautiful, innocent 15-year-olds who were about to learn a brutal lesson about how the world treats black excellence. Is something wrong with our seats? Maya asked, genuine concern in her voice. And Rebecca, hating herself but doing it anyway, said the words that would shatter their day. The captain is requesting that you move to economy seats. The confusion on their faces, the dawning hurt, the beginning of humiliation, it all crashed over Rebecca like a wave. But she'd made her choice. She'd chosen her job over their dignity. And she'd have to live with that decision for the rest of her life, knowing that when it mattered, when 2 children needed an adult to protect them, she'd been too afraid to do the right thing. Maya's confusion turned to fear in seconds. What did we do wrong? The captain has requested it, Rebecca repeated, still unable to meet their eyes. She held out her hand for their boarding passes like she was collecting evidence of a crime instead of proof of their legitimate purchase. Jordan stood up, his voice rising with a mixture of anger and desperation. This doesn't make sense. Our tickets are valid. We checked in. Everything was fine. Why are we being moved? Other passengers were turning now, craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. Phones started emerging from pockets and bags. The businessman in 3C, 𝒂𝙗𝒐𝐬, was watching intently, his face darkening with understanding of what he was witnessing. Please keep your voice down, Rebecca whispered urgently. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be? Maya's voice cracked. You're kicking us out of our seats for no reason. Everyone is staring at us like we did something wrong. Just cooperate, Rebecca pleaded. Please. I'll make sure you get good seats in economy. We already have good seats, Jordan said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling our father. He'll straighten this out. He dialed frantically, his hands shaking. The call went straight to voicemail. Marcus was somewhere over Georgia on his own flight, his phone on airplane mode, unreachable. Jordan tried again. Voicemail. Voicemail. Dad's not answering, Jordan said to Maya, panic creeping into his voice now. What do we do? Maya's eyes had filled with tears that were now spilling down her cheeks. She was acutely aware of every passenger watching them, of the whispers spreading through the cabin, of the phones recording their humiliation. This was supposed to be the start of the most important weekend of her life. Her national championship. Her chance to prove 3 years of sacrifice had been worth it. Instead, she was crying in front of strangers while being removed from seats her father had paid for, treated like she'd done something wrong when her only crime was being black in first class. We have to go, Maya whispered to Jordan. Everyone's watching. I can't do this anymore. No, Jordan said fiercely. This is wrong. We shouldn't have to move just because that pilot decided we don't belong here. But Rebecca was already reaching for their carry-on bags in the overhead bin. Captain's orders, she said, and those 2 words contained everything that was wrong with authority without accountability, with hierarchies that protected prejudice, with systems designed to make discrimination seem legitimate. Maya stood on shaking legs, her dance competition hoodie suddenly feeling like a target instead of a source of pride. Jordan grabbed their bags from Rebecca with barely controlled fury, and then began the walk of shame down the entire length of the aircraft. Past row 3 where 𝒂𝙗𝒐𝐬 watched with barely contained anger. Past row 8 where a mother covered her child's eyes like Maya and Jordan were the problem. Past row 15 where college students filmed everything for their social media. Past row 23 where an elderly couple whispered to each other. The aisle felt like it stretched for miles. Every face they passed was either staring with curiosity or deliberately looking away with discomfort. Not one person spoke up. Not one person said, wait, this is wrong. Not one person asked why 2 teenagers were being moved. They reached seats 32E and 32F in the very back of the plane, next to the bathrooms where the engine noise was loudest and the seats didn't recline. The cheapest seats on the aircraft. The seats that Captain Mitchell believed were appropriate for people who looked like them. Maya collapsed into her seat and put her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Jordan sat rigid with anger, his jaw clenched, his fists balled in his lap. Around them, economy passengers stared with the same mixture of curiosity and judgment that the first-class passengers had shown. Rebecca stood in the aisle for a moment, wanting to apologize, wanting to say something that would make this better. But there were no words that could undo what she'd just done. No apology that could restore the dignity she'd helped strip away. "I'm sorry," she whispered anyway, knowing it meant nothing. Jordan didn't even look at her. "You're sorry? You just humiliated us in front of 100 people because your captain is racist and you were too afraid to stand up to him. Your sorry means nothing." Rebecca walked back toward first class, past all those same passengers, feeling their judgment now too. She'd become complicit in discrimination. She'd chosen her paycheck over her principles. And everyone on this plane had watched her do it. And if you're watching this and thinking someone should have helped these kids, but you haven't subscribed to this channel that exposes these injustices, you need to understand something. You're no different from those passengers who watched and did nothing. Subscribing costs nothing. It takes 2 seconds. But it amplifies stories like Maya and Jordan's. It puts pressure on airlines to change. It shows these kids that people care. If you can't even click a button after watching teenagers cry from racial profiling, then what does that say about you? Subscribe now. Don't be another silent witness. In seats 32E and 32F, Maya and Jordan sat in shocked silence as the plane finally pushed back from the gate. The trip that should have been filled with excitement and hope had become a nightmare before they'd even taken off. And Captain Bradley Mitchell, secure in his cockpit, had no idea that one of those humiliated teenagers had just left a tearful voicemail for a father who would move heaven and earth to make him pay for what he'd done. Robert Chen had lived 73 years on this earth. He'd built a successful import business, raised 4 children, traveled to 60 countries, and considered himself a decent judge of character and situations. And what he'd just witnessed was one of the clearest cases of racial discrimination he'd ever seen. He'd watched Maya and Jordan board with legitimate first-class tickets. Had seen them settle into their seats politely, quietly, bothering no one. Had noticed the captain emerge from the cockpit, stop at their row, and immediately change his demeanor. Had observed the hushed but heated conversation between the captain and flight attendant Rebecca. Had witnessed the whole shameful process of 2 teenagers being removed from their paid seats and marched to the back of the plane while everyone watched in silence. Robert had lived through the civil rights era. Had been a young man when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, when freedom riders were beaten for challenging segregation. He'd thought, naively perhaps, that those days were behind them. That progress had been made. That his grandchildren would inherit a better world. But watching Maya's tears and Jordan's helpless fury had shattered that illusion. The methods had changed, but the message was the same. Black people don't belong in premium spaces. Know your place. Stay in the back. And Robert Chen was not going to be another silent witness to injustice. As Rebecca walked back toward first class after depositing the twins in economy, Robert stopped her with a raised hand. His voice was quiet but firm, the tone of a man who'd commanded boardrooms and wouldn't be dismissed. "Excuse me. I need to understand what just happened." Rebecca's face showed the guilt she was carrying. "Sir, I really can't discuss passenger situations." "I'm not asking you to discuss it," Robert said. "I'm telling you what I saw. I watched those 2 teenagers board with valid first-class tickets. I saw you scan them yourself. They were legitimate passengers who'd done nothing wrong. And then I watched your captain order you to move them, and I watched you comply. So I'm asking you directly, why were they really moved?" Rebecca's professionalism was crumbling under the weight of her complicity. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Captain's orders. He said they didn't belong in first class." "Because they're black," Robert said flatly. "Say it. That's why, isn't it?" Rebecca's silence was confirmation enough. A single tear ran down her cheek as she nodded almost imperceptibly. Robert felt rage building in his chest, but it was the cold, calculated anger of someone who knew how to fight injustice effectively. "Thank you for your honesty. What's the captain's name?" "Captain Bradley Mitchell," Rebecca said. "But sir, please don't make this bigger. I could lose my job for telling you." "You should lose your job," Robert said, not unkindly. "Because you participated in discrimination even though you knew it was wrong. But Captain Mitchell should lose a lot more than that." He pulled out his phone and opened the video camera. He recorded a detailed testimony, speaking clearly and calmly, making sure every word was documented. "My name is Robert Chen. Today, December 17, 2024, I'm a passenger on Prestige Airways Flight 118 from Miami to New York. I witnessed what I believe to be clear racial discrimination by Captain Bradley Mitchell. Two black teenagers, approximately 15 years old, boarded this aircraft with legitimate first-class tickets in seats 2A and 2B. I personally saw their boarding passes during the boarding process. They were properly checked in, properly seated, and were causing no disturbance whatsoever. Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit, saw these teenagers, and within minutes ordered flight attendant 𝒂𝙁to remove them from first class and relocate them to economy seats in the rear of the aircraft. When I questioned Ms. Torres, she confirmed that the captain ordered their removal despite their tickets being valid, stating he believed they didn't belong in first class. The only distinguishing characteristic of these passengers compared to the rest of first class is their race. This is racial profiling and discrimination, and I'm documenting it for legal and corporate review. He ended the recording and immediately pulled up his email. He'd been a platinum member of Prestige Airways for 15 years, knew the corporate structure, had the executive customer service email address saved in his contacts. What Robert didn't know was that Prestige Airways had recently been acquired, that the corporate email address he was sending to had been redirected to a new executive team, that his detailed testimony of Captain Mitchell's discrimination was about to land directly in the inbox of the airline's new owner. An owner who happened to be the father of the two teenagers Mitchell had just humiliated. Robert typed quickly, attaching the video and adding context in writing. He described everything he'd witnessed, included his contact information, demanded immediate investigation and action. He hit send and felt the small satisfaction that comes from refusing to be a bystander, from choosing to do something rather than nothing. Around him, other first-class passengers had watched his interaction with Rebecca. Some looked uncomfortable, realizing they'd been complicit in their silence. Others seemed annoyed at the disruption to their peaceful flight. A few nodded at Robert with respect, recognizing that he'd done what they should have done. But none of them had pulled out their phones to add their voices to his. None of them had documented what they'd seen. None of them had been willing to risk even the mild social discomfort of speaking up. Robert settled back into his seat, his phone in his lap, waiting for a response that he hoped would come quickly. He had no idea that his email had just set in motion a chain of events that would end Captain Bradley Mitchell's career within the hour. In the cockpit, Mitchell was completing his pre-flight checklist, completely unaware that his actions had been documented and reported. Completely unaware that one of the passengers he'd assumed would stay silent had instead become a witness who would not be ignored. And in seats 32E and 32F at the back of the plane, Maya and Jordan sat in numb shock, unaware that help was coming, that their father would soon know everything, that justice was already in motion. Sometimes the most important thing a bystander can do is refuse to stay silent. Robert Chen had done that. And his refusal to accept injustice was about to change everything. The plane was cleared for pushback. Engines began to power up. And in 30 seconds, Maya's voicemail would finally reach her father's phone, 30,000 feet away on another aircraft. And Marcus Carter would make a call that would bring this plane right back to the gate before it ever left the ground. 300 miles away, somewhere over northern Georgia, Marcus Carter sat in seat 3A of American Airlines Flight 892 from Atlanta to New York. He was reviewing acquisition documents on his laptop, finalizing details of the Prestige Airways restructuring that he'd kept confidential while implementing necessary changes. His phone was on airplane mode, but he'd paid for Wi-Fi to stay connected to his executive team. A notification popped up. Voicemail from Maya. That was odd. She should be mid-flight herself by now, probably watching a movie or doing homework. He clicked to listen, expecting maybe a quick "I love you" or "we're about to take off" message. Instead, he heard his daughter's voice shaking with tears and humiliation. "Daddy, they made us move. The pilot said we don't belong in first class. He looked at us and just decided we didn't belong there. Everyone was staring at us like we did something wrong. We showed them our tickets, but it didn't matter. They walked us all the way to the back of the plane and everyone was watching and recording and I was crying and Jordan tried to call you but you didn't answer and now we're in the worst seats and my competition is tomorrow and I can't stop crying and this trip is ruined and I don't understand what we did wrong, Daddy. We didn't do anything wrong. Her voice broke completely into sobs. Jordan's voice came on in the background, equally distressed. "Dad, the captain is racist. He racially profiled us. He just looked at us and decided we were scamming or something. This is so messed up." Marcus Carter's hand clenched around his phone so tightly the case creaked. His jaw set in a way his executive team would have recognized immediately, the expression that preceded swift and devastating action. Around him, other first-class passengers continued their peaceful flights, unaware that the man in 3A had just transformed from businessman to avenging father. He opened his email, saw Robert Chen's message had just arrived with its damning video testimony. He watched it once, his face growing colder with each word. Then he made a call. His COO, Jennifer Wu, answered on the first ring. "Marcus, I just got an email from a passenger on Flight 118. There's been an incident." "I know," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm in the way that made Jennifer's blood run cold. "My children are on that flight. Captain Mitchell racially profiled them and had them removed from first class." Jennifer's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Oh my God. Marcus, I'm so sorry. What do you need?" "Ground Flight 118 immediately. I don't care if it's at the gate or taxiing or in line for takeoff. Bring it back." Captain Bradley Mitchell's authority is revoked effective this moment. He is not to fly that aircraft anywhere. Marcus will have the new captain take over and— "No," Marcus interrupted. "I want Mitchell off that plane before it goes anywhere. Contact tower control. Contact airport operations. Use whatever authority you need to use and invoke my name if necessary. That plane does not take off with Mitchell in command." "Understood," Jennifer said, already typing commands to her team. "What else?" "Have security meet the aircraft. I want our head of HR there. I want our chief legal counsel there. I want every piece of security footage from that plane pulled and preserved. I want Mitchell's personnel file on my phone in 15 minutes. And Jennifer, I want a full passenger manifest with contact information. Every person who sat in that first-class cabin and watched my children be humiliated is going to get a personal call from me." "I'm on it," Jennifer said. "Marcus, I am so deeply sorry this happened to Maya and Jordan." "It's not your fault," Marcus said. "But it's about to be Captain Mitchell's worst day. How long until Flight 118 can be brought back to the gate?" "They're still at the gate actually," Jennifer said, checking her systems. "They haven't pushed back yet. I can have Tower hold them immediately." "Do it," Marcus said. "And Jennifer, one more thing. Get me on the next available flight to Miami. I'm going to that airport personally." "You're going to Miami instead of New York?" "My children need me," Marcus said simply. "Everything else can wait." He ended the call and immediately tried to reach Maya and Jordan directly. Their phones were off or on airplane mode, unreachable. He sent a text anyway, knowing they'd see it eventually. "Baby girl, Jordan, Daddy knows everything. I'm fixing it right now. You did nothing wrong. Captain Mitchell made a terrible mistake and he's going to pay for it. I love you both. Hold on." Then he opened his laptop and began drafting an email to Captain Bradley Mitchell's personnel file, documenting everything for the termination that was about to happen. Marcus Carter had built an empire through strategic thinking and careful planning. But he'd also built it through knowing when to unleash overwhelming force against those who threatened what he loved. And Captain Bradley Mitchell had just threatened his children. In Miami, Flight 118 was seconds away from pushback when the gate agent's voice crackled urgently through the cockpit radio. "Captain Mitchell, hold position. Do not push back. You are ordered to return to the gate immediately for an emergency meeting with airline ownership." Mitchell, annoyed at the delay and completely unaware of the storm descending on him, responded with irritation. "Tower, this is Flight 118. What's the nature of the emergency?" The tower controller's voice was carefully neutral. "Captain, you are ordered to deplane immediately. This is not optional." And in that moment, Bradley Mitchell's 28-year career began its final countdown to termination. Flight 118 sat frozen at the gate, engines powered down, passengers confused and increasingly frustrated. The intercom crackled with the gate agent's voice, unusually tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated." Captain Bradley Mitchell stood in the cockpit doorway, his face showing irritation but not concern. He'd been flying for 28 years. He'd dealt with delays before. Probably some paperwork issue or a maintenance flag that needed clearing. Nothing he couldn't handle with a few phone calls and his seniority card. Rebecca Torres stood near the galley, her stomach churning with anxiety. Something felt wrong. The urgency in the gate agent's voice. The way operations had bypassed normal protocols. She caught Daniel Kim's eye and saw her own worry reflected back. "Captain Mitchell," the gate agent's voice came again through the radio. "You are ordered to deplane immediately for an emergency meeting with airline ownership. Security and management are waiting in the jetway." Mitchell rolled his eyes at his first officer. Ownership? Probably some bean counter upset about fuel costs or departure times. He keyed his radio. "Copy, deplaning now." He grabbed his flight bag and strode confidently down the aisle, still wearing his captain's uniform with its 4 stripes, still carrying himself with the authority of nearly 3 decades in command. Passengers watched him go, some annoyed at the delay, others curious about what was happening. As Mitchell stepped into the jetway, he saw them waiting. A man in an immaculate navy suit that probably cost more than Mitchell made in a month. 2 people in business attire holding legal pads. 3 others with HR badges. 2 airport security officers standing at attention. The man in the suit stood with perfect posture, but his eyes were cold fire. Mitchell still didn't understand. Still thought this was some administrative issue he'd charm his way through. "Captain Mitchell?" the man said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. "That's right," Mitchell said with false confidence. "And you are?" The man stepped closer, and when he spoke, every word was precisely chosen, every syllable carrying the weight of power and fury combined. "I'm Marcus Carter. I own this airline. And you just racially profiled and humiliated my children." Mitchell's face went from ruddy confidence to chalk white in seconds. His mouth opened and closed but no sound came out. His brain was trying to process what he'd just heard, trying to reconcile the 2 black teenagers he'd dismissed as scammers with the man standing in front of him who owned the entire airline. "Mr. Carter," Mitchell finally managed, his voice cracking. "I didn't know they were I didn't realize they weren't identified as." "Finish that sentence," Marcus said, his voice dropping even lower. "They weren't identified as what, Captain Mitchell? They weren't identified as human beings who deserve basic dignity? They weren't identified as paying customers with legitimate tickets? Or they weren't identified as my children so you thought you could abuse them without consequences?" "It was a misunderstanding," Mitchell stammered. "Their tickets looked suspicious. I was following protocol for." "Their tickets were purchased with my personal credit card 4 days ago," Marcus interrupted. "There was nothing suspicious about them except that they were being used by 2 black teenagers." "Say it, Captain. Say what you really thought when you saw my children." Mitchell's silence was damning. "Security footage shows everything," Marcus continued, pulling out a tablet held by one of the attorneys. "We have multiple angles. We have witness testimony, including a detailed video statement from a passenger in first class who documented your discrimination. We have the flight attendant's admission that you ordered them moved despite valid tickets. And most importantly, we have my daughter's voicemail telling me how you made her cry in front of 100 people." Marcus played a portion of Maya's tearful message. Mitchell listened to her sobs, heard her confusion and pain, and finally seemed to grasp the enormity of what he'd done. "I have a spotless record," Mitchell said desperately. 28 years of service. This was just one incident. A mistake in judgment. I can apologize to your children. I can make this right." Marcus's laugh was bitter and without humor. "One incident? Captain Mitchell, how many other black passengers have you profiled over 28 years? How many other families have you humiliated who didn't have a father who owned the airline to hold you accountable?" Marcus stepped even closer to Mitchell, close enough that the captain could see the controlled fury burning in his eyes. "Your spotless record," Marcus said, his voice like ice, "ends today. Right here. Right now." One of the attorneys handed Marcus a folder. He opened it deliberately, making Mitchell watch as he reviewed documents that would destroy a career built over nearly 3 decades. Captain Bradley Mitchell, employed with Prestige Airways since 1996. 28 years of service. Currently making $187,000 annually with full benefits and pension eligibility in 2 years. Marcus looked up from the file. Had pension eligibility. Past tense. Mr. Carter, please, Mitchell's voice cracked. I made a mistake. I admit it. But I have a family. A daughter getting married. A mortgage. You can't just... I can't just what? Marcus interrupted sharply. I can't just terminate someone who committed blatant racial discrimination against minors? Someone who abused their authority to humiliate children based solely on the color of their skin? Someone who violated every anti-discrimination policy we have? It wasn't like that, Mitchell tried weakly. Then tell me what it was like, Marcus demanded. Tell me why you took one look at my 15-year-old children and decided they were criminals. Tell me what about their appearance, their behavior, their tickets made you think they didn't belong in first class. I'm listening, Captain. Explain it to me. Mitchell's mouth opened and closed. Every explanation that came to mind revealed the racism he couldn't admit to. They were young. They were wearing hoodies. They didn't look like typical first-class passengers. Every excuse was an indictment. That's what I thought, Marcus said. You can't explain it without admitting you racially profiled them. So let me explain what happens now. He nodded to the HR representatives, who stepped forward with documents. Captain Bradley Mitchell, you are terminated from Prestige Airways effective immediately, the senior HR director said, her voice professional but firm. You are required to surrender your employee badge, security credentials, and any company property. You will be escorted from the premises by security. My pension, Mitchell said desperately. I'm 2 years from full retirement. You can't take that. Your pension is under legal review, Marcus said. Our attorneys are examining whether your violation of our anti-discrimination policies constitutes breach of contract sufficient to void pension obligations. You'll be notified of that decision within 30 days. Mitchell's legs seemed to buckle slightly. 28 years of contributions, of planning for retirement, suddenly in jeopardy because of one decision, one moment of prejudice acting on decades of unchallenged bias. Additionally, Marcus continued, our legal team will be determining whether to pursue criminal charges for civil rights violations and whether to cooperate with any federal investigation the Department of Transportation may initiate. Racial discrimination in air travel is a federal offense, Captain. You may face more than just losing your job. This will destroy me, Mitchell whispered. Marcus's expression didn't soften. You destroyed yourself the moment you looked at my children and decided they were less than human. You destroyed yourself when you prioritized your prejudice over their dignity. You destroyed yourself when you used your authority to inflict humiliation on teenagers who'd done nothing wrong except exist while black in a space you decided they didn't belong. I'm not a racist, Mitchell said, the last desperate defense of people who commit racist acts but can't face the label. I've never used slurs. I've never been violent. I just thought. You just thought black teenagers couldn't afford first class legitimately, Marcus finished. You just thought they must have scammed or stolen their way into those seats. You just thought they needed to be put in their place. That's racism, Captain. And your inability to recognize it after 28 years in this industry tells me you've probably done this before to passengers who didn't have the resources to fight back. Security officers stepped forward. Mitchell looked at them, then back at Marcus, realization fully sinking in that this wasn't negotiable, wasn't something he could charm or explain his way out of. Your uniform, one of the HR representatives said, gesturing to Mitchell's captain's jacket with its 4 stripes. Company property. Remove it, please. The ultimate humiliation. Stripping the uniform that had defined his identity for 3 decades. Mitchell's hands shook as he removed his jacket, revealing just a white shirt underneath. Without the uniform, he looked smaller, diminished, just a man whose prejudice had finally caught up with him. Security will escort you to collect any personal items from your locker, the HR director continued. You are not to contact any current employees. You are banned from all Prestige Airways property. Violation will result in trespassing charges. My daughter's wedding, Mitchell said suddenly, grasping at anything. It's next month. I'm walking her down the aisle. I need my job for. Your daughter, Marcus said quietly, and there was something almost pitying in his voice now. Captain, you just demonstrated to the world exactly what you think of people who look different from you. How do you think your daughter will feel when she sees the news coverage? When she sees what you did to children not much younger than her? Mitchell's face crumbled as that particular consequence hit him. His daughter Jennifer was engaged to Terrence, a black accountant Mitchell had always been coolly polite to but never truly accepted. He'd told himself he wasn't racist, that his discomfort with the relationship was about something else, anything else. But now his racism was about to be displayed nationally, and Jennifer would have to reconcile the father she thought she knew with the man who'd just been fired for discriminating against black children. "This is your last chance to walk out of here with some dignity," Marcus said. "Take it, or security will remove you." Mitchell, broken, turned and walked toward the security officers. As they flanked him to escort him through the terminal, Marcus called out one final thing. "Captain Mitchell." Mitchell turned back, hope flickering that maybe there was a reprieve. "My children are 15 years old," Marcus said. "They're honor students. Maya is a nationally ranked dancer. Jordan is an award-winning journalist. They're kind, responsible, brilliant kids who've never been in trouble. And you made them cry. You made my daughter question whether she belongs in spaces she's earned the right to occupy. That's what you did today. I want you to remember their faces every time you wonder why your life fell apart." Mitchell had no response. He turned and walked away, flanked by security, his career over, his reputation destroyed, his comfortable retirement in jeopardy, all because he'd looked at two teenagers and let his prejudice dictate his actions. Marcus watched him go, then turned to his team. "Get the new captain briefed and ready. I want Flight 118 back on schedule as soon as possible. And someone tell my children I'm boarding that plane." One of the attorneys smiled slightly. "Sir, are you sure you want to address the passengers? It might be better to." "Those passengers watched my children be humiliated and did nothing," Marcus said. "Oh, I'm addressing them. They need to understand what they witnessed and what their silence enabled." He straightened his suit jacket and walked toward the aircraft door, ready to board his own airline and reclaim his children's dignity in front of every person who'd failed to defend it. Marcus Carter stepped onto Flight 118 and the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Passengers who'd been grumbling about delays suddenly went silent as this man in the expensive suit walked purposefully down the aisle, his destination clearly the back of the plane. Maya saw him first. "Daddy," she gasped, and then she was up and out of her seat, Jordan right behind her. They met their father in the aisle and he gathered them both into his arms, holding them tight while Maya sobbed into his shoulder and Jordan's body shook with relief. "I'm so sorry," Marcus whispered into their hair. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. You did nothing wrong. Nothing." The entire cabin watched this reunion, and slowly, understanding began to dawn on faces throughout the aircraft. The man embracing those teenagers wasn't just a concerned parent. He was someone important. Someone powerful. Marcus pulled back slightly, cupped Maya's tear-stained face in his hands. "You're going to that competition tomorrow. You're going to dance your heart out. And you're going to do it from first-class seats because that's where you belong." He turned to address the cabin, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "My name is Marcus Carter. I own this airline. What you just witnessed was racial discrimination against my children by Captain Mitchell. He has been terminated effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The passengers who'd watched and filmed but stayed silent suddenly looked uncomfortable, ashamed. Captain Mitchell racially profiled two teenagers with legitimate first-class tickets and had them removed because he decided they didn't belong, Marcus continued. "Some of you recorded it. Some of you watched. But only one person spoke up. Mr. Robert Chen in 3C stood up for my children when everyone else stayed silent." Robert Chen looked startled as Marcus walked toward him, hand extended. "Sir, thank you for refusing to be a bystander. For documenting the truth. For being brave enough to fight injustice when others wouldn't." Robert shook his hand firmly. "I just did what anyone should have done. I'm sorry more people didn't." Marcus addressed the cabin again. "Every passenger on this flight will receive a full refund and a travel voucher. But I want you to think about what you witnessed today and what you chose to do about it. Silence in the face of racism makes you complicit." He gestured to Rebecca Torres, who stood frozen near the galley, tears streaming down her face. "Miss Torres, I know you were following orders. But you still made a choice. We'll be discussing your future with this airline." Rebecca nodded, unable to speak. Marcus turned to Robert. "Mr. Chen, please move to seats 2A or 2B. Consider yourself upgraded with lifetime platinum status on Prestige Airways. Your integrity deserves recognition." The cabin erupted in applause as Marcus escorted his children back up the aisle to their rightful seats. Maya and Jordan walked with their heads high now, their father's presence restoring the dignity Mitchell had tried to strip away. A new captain's voice came over the intercom, professional and warm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Sarah Rodriguez. I apologize for the delay. We're cleared for departure to New York. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for pushback." As the plane finally began to move, Maya leaned against her father's shoulder. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know, baby girl," Marcus said. "But you were also brave. You stood up for yourself. You didn't accept injustice quietly. I'm proud of you both." Jordan spoke up from across the aisle where he sat next to Robert Chen. "Dad, what's going to happen to Captain Mitchell?" "Justice," Marcus said simply. "Real consequences for discriminatory actions. He'll never fly again. And his story will be a warning to anyone else who thinks they can treat people this way." Within 2 hours of Flight 118 finally departing for New York, Prestige Airways released a statement that went viral before the plane even landed. Prestige Airways announces the immediate termination of Captain Bradley Mitchell for racial discrimination against passengers. "We apologize to the Carter family and reaffirm our zero-tolerance policy for prejudice. Comprehensive bias training will be mandatory for all employees." The story exploded across news outlets. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Local stations in every major market. By the time Maya and Jordan landed in New York, the footage from passenger phones had been viewed 8 million times. #Justice for the Carters trended nationally. Civil rights organizations issued statements praising Marcus Carter's swift action while condemning the discrimination his children had faced. But the most devastating consequence came 3 days later. Jennifer Mitchell was scrolling through her phone when she saw her father's name trending on Twitter. She clicked the link and watched the viral video of Maya crying as she was walked to the back of the plane. Watched her father's face as he ordered their removal. Heard the witness testimonies describing his blatant racism. Her hand went to her mouth. Her fiancé Terrence, sitting beside her on their couch planning wedding seating charts, looked over. "Babe, what's wrong?" Jennifer couldn't speak. She just turned her phone toward him. Terrence watched the footage, his face hardening as he understood what he was seeing. "That's your father?" Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. She'd always defended her dad when Terrence quietly mentioned microaggressions at family dinners, when he'd expressed discomfort at her father's comments about their neighborhood, when he'd asked if they should have the wedding somewhere her father would be more comfortable. She'd insisted her father wasn't racist, just old-fashioned, just set in his ways. But this video showed the truth she'd been avoiding. Her father looked at black children and saw criminals. What did he really think about Terrence? About their future children who would be biracial? She called her father from a number he wouldn't recognize. He answered on the third ring, his voice tired and defeated. "Dad, it's Jennifer." Her voice was cold, controlled. "I saw the video. I saw what you did to those kids. Jenny, it's not what it looks like. I made a mistake, but the media is blowing it out of proportion. I'm not a racist. You know me." "I thought I knew you," Jennifer said. "But then I watched you humiliate 2 teenagers for being black in first class. I watched you do to them what I'm terrified you think about Terrence every time he walks into your house." "That's not fair," Mitchell protested. "Terrence is different." He's what, Dad? He's one of the good ones? He's not like those kids?" "Finish that sentence. Tell me how Terrence is different from 2 honor students whose only crime was sitting in seats they paid for." "Terrence and I are getting married next month," Jennifer continued, her voice breaking. "And you're not invited. I don't want you walking me down the aisle. I don't want you in the photos. I don't want my children knowing their grandfather is the man who made a 15-year-old girl cry because of her skin color. Lose my number, Dad. We're done." She hung up before he could respond. Terrence wrapped his arms around her as she sobbed, mourning the father she thought she had while accepting the reality of who he actually was. Bradley Mitchell sat alone in his house, his career gone, his pension in jeopardy, his daughter disowning him, his name permanently associated with racism. He'd lost everything in 3 days because of one decision, one moment of prejudice he'd never had to face consequences for until now. And if you've watched this entire story, felt the pain of what Maya and Jordan experienced, felt anger at the injustice, but you still haven't subscribed to this channel, you need to ask yourself what that means. Are you really against racism, or are you just against having to do anything about it? Subscribing takes 2 seconds. It costs nothing, but it amplifies these stories. It puts pressure on systems to change. It shows families like the Carters that people care enough to act, not just watch. If you can't even click a button after seeing children humiliated, then you're no different from those passengers who recorded but stayed silent. Don't just be another viewer. Be part of the solution. Subscribe now. Meanwhile, Maya competed at the National Youth Dance Championship and won first place. Jordan wrote an article about their experience that was published in the New York Times youth section. And Marcus Carter implemented the airline industry's most comprehensive anti-discrimination program, with mandatory training, independent oversight committees, and a passenger bill of rights specifically protecting against profiling. But late at night, Maya still had nightmares about walking down that aisle while everyone stared. Jordan still felt his jaw clench when he boarded planes. The justice they'd received couldn't erase the trauma they'd endured. That's the reality of racism. Even when you win, even when consequences are delivered, even when the system finally works, the scars remain. Maya and Jordan got justice. But they also got a lesson about how the world sees them that no 15-year-old should have to learn. Sometimes victory and trauma coexist. Sometimes justice comes too late to prevent the wound. And sometimes the only thing you can do is make sure it never happens again to someone else. Marcus Carter had done that. Robert Chen had done that. And now the question is, what will you do when you witness injustice? Will you speak up? Will you document? Will you act? Or will you be another silent passenger, watching discrimination happen while you record it for social media but never intervene? The choice, as it always has been, is yours.